Friends in Christ. Dark is one of the words that often is descriptive of something. One of the uses about dark is things are not good. If you look at the history books, some of you remember there was a period of time in medieval Europe that was called the Dark Ages. The plague was prevalent, there was not much for enlightenment, there was little in advancement in literature, music, health, whatever. And eventually he got out of it with an age of enlightenment, but it took several decades to get through it. Or if you look at the history book or some of the material on World War II, they talk about the dark days of World War II. Obviously things were not always going in our way, and we're fighting around the world with very strong enemies, and it was a challenge. Sometimes we talk about living under a dark cloud. We've got a person lose their job, feel like they're under a cloud. Or a person goes to the doctor and has a bad report. There's darkness there. Most of these things, eventually light will show, but it takes time to get through that dark cloud. It took several decades to get through the Dark Ages. It took many years to get through World War II. Some of the personal things maybe we never get through. But on the other hand, there's a promise of light. Genesis 1:1 starts out, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form, and darkness, there's that word, was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, let there be light. And there was light. Light overcomes darkness. Sometimes we have to really look to find it, but it is there. The first Isaiah, the first several chapters, is a time of darkness for the Jewish people. The mighty Assyrian army has come, they've ransacked the northern kingdom of Israel, Syria, other countries in that region. They're on the doorsteps of Jerusalem. It is really dark. And people weren't killed by the attack, they were hauled off into slavery. What future do we have? And the prophet Isaiah says that God has a promise. It may take a while, because he operates on God's time, not on our time. And so we turn to the 9th chapter. Nonetheless, those who were in distress will not be exhausted. At an earlier time, God cursed the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But later he glorified the way of the sea, the far side of the Jordan, and the Galilee of the nations. And you'll hear this again in our gospel text. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light, and those living in a pitch dark land, light has dawned. You have made the nation great. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest. And those who divide plunder rejoice. As on that day of Midian, you shattered the yoke that burdened them, the staff on their shoulders and the rod of their oppressor. It's a dark time. How do you find hope when everything in your whole world is crashed down? You listen to the prophets saying God has a plan. God will give you hope to get through things. But it wasn't just a dark time when the Assyrians came around 700 BC. It was a dark time when Jesus began his public ministry. Instead of the Assyrians, it was the Romans that controlled the people and the countryside. They claimed all the property, they claimed the sea. So if you farmed, you had to give part of your crop to a Roman. If you fished, part of your crop or fishing haul had to go to Rome. I saw a figure that somewhere 70 to 90% of the people at that time were in what we would call poverty. Sickness was prevalent. And why do you think Jesus was so popular for healing? People didn't have adequate nourishment. They didn't have good medicine. They worked hard for little reward. It was a time of darkness. And who is going to bring light into a dark world? Well, our first guess is Jesus. Jesus will bring light. From Matthew 4. Now when Jesus heard that John, this is John the Baptist, was arrested, he went to Galilee, because he had been in the Jordan area around Jerusalem. He left Nazareth and settled in Capernaum, which lies alongside the sea in the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. Zebulun and Naphtali are two of the 12 tribes of Israel that came out of, when the land was resettled after the Exodus. And they're in the kind of the northern part or northeast part of what we would call Israel. This fulfilled what Isaiah the prophet said, land of Zebulun and land of Naphtali. Alongside the sea, across the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who lived in the ark have seen a great light, and light has come upon those who lived in that region and in the shadow of death. From that time, Jesus began to announce, change your hearts and lives. Here comes the kingdom of heaven. As Jesus walked alongside the Galilee Sea, he saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and Andrew throwing fishing nets into the sea, because they were fishermen. Come, follow me, he said, and I'll show you how to fish for people. Right away they left their nets and followed him. Continuing on, he saw another set of brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with Zebedee, their father, repairing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. Jesus traveled throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues. He announced the good news of the kingdom and healed every disease and sickness among the people. May God bless our hearing of his holy word. One of the things that we see in the Gospel of Matthew is how the writer of that Gospel ties Jesus as the Messiah, as an answer to the prophecies of the Old Testament. He was born in Bethlehem, according to the prophet. He and his family fled to Egypt for safety and came out of Egypt. Again, that prophecy that thus I will call my son out of Egypt. He moved to Nazareth, so he'd be called a Nazarene. He moved to Capernaum, so it comes from these lands of Zebulun and Naphtali. The writer of Matthew is trying to tell the people that read his letter, tell us, Jesus is the Messiah. He is the Christ. He is the one that God has promised. And he brought light into a dark world. But he knew he couldn't do it himself. His stay was only going to be a limited time. It turned out to be somewhere 2 to 3 years, depending on what text you read in his ministry. And he was going to have others to carry on the message. Now, where would you go to find help if you wanted to start a religious movement? Would you go to the sea and call fishermen? Pretty unlikely people. They were hard workers, but they were not particularly high on the social spectrum. One of those things that they don't tell us in this text, if a stranger came up and said, follow me, what's the likelihood of somebody saying, okay, I'm off? Probably not too big. So you wonder what happened in the background that Peter and Andrew, James and John, at least were aware of who Jesus was in his ministry. And that they decided, hey, this could be an interesting gig. Little do they know where they would lead them. But they were the first disciples. And we're part of that tradition. We are disciples today. We have carried that line from Peter and Andrew, James and John, throughout all the millennium. And that we are part of this hope. Then part of our calling is to shed the light, or share the light of Jesus. This morning downstairs, one of the songs that the kids sang with Carol was "This Little Light of Mine." We can't be a big floodlight, probably, but we can have that little light. That little light that we shine to bring darkness, to defeat darkness in places. To bring hope to people. Does it mean that everything's going to be wonderful? No. But we can handle it. We can deal with it. In some of the background material I was reading for this week, there was somebody was saying about the election. One person he knows said, if Trump is reelected, that'll be the end of the country as we know it. Another person said, if Elizabeth Warren is elected, that'll be the end of the country as we know it. Now, I'm not being political here, please understand, but that's how divided we are. And that's a sad commentary. How can we bring light into division? We can listen, we can understand, we don't have to agree, but we can be respectful and caring of that other person's opinion and do our thing. A long time ago, in my early life, I was worked in an elevator in central Iowa, and one of the customers was Mr. Democrat for that region. His name was Otis Lichwater. You might guess he was a little bit German. And he weighed probably 300 pounds. And his little wife, Anna, who probably was lucky to weigh 100 pounds dripping wet. So he had quite a contrast. And one day he was in the office and said, I'm going to vote for whoever. Who are you going to vote for, my dear? And she looked at him very sweetly and said, my secret ballot. And that's the way we should do. That we hold our opinions far enough back that that light will shine. That we don't offend somebody just by our presence because we believe X, Y, Z or A, B, C or whatever. And with the caucuses only a week away, brace yourself for phone calls and ads. You'll have plenty. And will we find light in any of those? Who knows? But we're to bring light into the world. And we're to be examples. We're not to be we're the fishermen of people. And we don't go out with a big net and bring everybody into the church for motorboat. But by our light shining, by the way we live, we want people to say, that's where I belong. That's where I belong. That's part of my world, and I want to be like that person. As our first song said, make room. Make room for God in our hearts. Make room for the love of Jesus as we go in our daily lives. Tempting to love our neighbor